They poured me calming chamomile at Christmas. I woke to hospital beeps, and a neighbor whispering, "They're emptying your house." They didn't expect me home by 4 a.m. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. I turned 65 the week the snow finally stuck to the hedges. The first 2 flurries of December had dissolved into chilly rain, but by Christmas week every porch in our cul-de-sac wore a soft white shoulder. I salted my steps with the same methodical care I gave to everything, 3 scoops, 2 feet apart, leaving a thin gray ribbon from the gate to my front door. My hands still remembered other winters, feeding logs into a wood stove at 2 in the morning while my wife, Evelyn, slept, brushing snow from the hood of the old Ford, warming the engine with the hood propped like a jaw. I had been alone for 6 years. Alone in that practical, uncomplaining way a widower learns, the house quiet but not unfriendly, the kettle always ready to help fill the rooms with a sound. When the invitation to Christmas dinner came from my son and daughter-in-law, tied with twine around a jar of cinnamon pecan nuts, I told myself the oddness I felt wasn't anything. Just a looped wire in my chest that hummed when family and holiday and memory were close together. "Bring your famous cranberry relish, Dad," Mark had texted. Then, on a second line that pretended to be casual, "and your folder with house papers, we might as well go over the wool stuff now that taxes changed again." No biggie. No biggie. It's the kind of phrase younger people toss like confetti. In my life, bigginess never announced itself. It stood quietly at the window, fogging the glass, until you turned and saw. I made the relish the way I always had, with orange peel and the smallest possible dice. I laid out the papers he meant, deed, a fat envelope of paid-off notices, the life insurance policy from years ago, the simple will Evelyn and I had signed at the kitchen table with a notary who smelled faintly of hairspray. I set them in a plain accordion folder and then put that folder into my canvas tote, the way you tuck your dentures into their case. Not like they're a secret. More like they are part of you, but you don't want them jangling. The afternoon of Christmas Eve the sky was a pale nickel. I wore the blue sweater Emma knitted me, the one with 2 uneven cuffs, and I brought a bottle of non-alcoholic cider because I haven't been able to drink since my heart began whispering complaints in the spring. When I closed the door behind me the house did its usual sigh, a heat register ticking, the soft crack of the settling beams. I checked the locks twice. I don't know why. Habit. Or maybe because my neighbor Ruth, and before Ruth, my wife, had both said, "Harold, you are the kind of man people trust without thinking. Be careful around people who think." It should have been a good night. The first thing I noticed when I pulled into my son's driveway was the extra car, a black sedan I didn't recognize. The second was the light bleeding out of every window. Too much light, like a stage. Mark met me at the door. He had the smile he uses for clients and small talk, a neat smile that keeps the teeth from showing anything true. Cassie came next, my daughter-in-law, with a hug that was silk on the outside and calculation underneath. "Dad," she chirped. "We were just saying it's not Christmas without your relish." Behind her, my grandchildren peered around the banister like small, guilty spies. Ben waved and then disappeared. Emma held my eyes for an extra second, the way Evelyn used to when we were alerting each other to a bird outside. "Come in, Harold," said a man I didn't know. Early 50s, thick hair, a watch face like a coin. "I'm Gary. I work with Mark on, the estate stuff." "Lovely to meet you." We were just chatting about how confusing the new forms are. "Gary's a planner," Cassie said too brightly. "We figured we could just talk big picture after dinner, if that's okay." "No pressure." No pressure. Another confetti phrase. My fingers tightened around the handles of the tote. I smiled, because I am a man who has learned that smiling lets you keep your map to yourself for a few more miles. Dinner was ham and roasted carrots and a brown gravy that clung stubbornly to the spoon. Everyone behaved as if rehearsed. Mark carved with concentration, the muscle along his jaw fluttering. Cassie refilled water glasses before they emptied. Gary told a story that wasn't funny, and everyone laughed. The kids kept asking permission for things they never asked permission for. May I be excused? May I have more bread? As if polishing some invisible silver. I set the relish on the table and passed the rolls and listened to the rhythms of my family like a mechanic listening to an engine whose rattle he can't quite locate. I smelled cinnamon in the air. The lights were warmer than necessary. My seat had been chosen with a care that made me uneasy, a direct line to the kitchen door, a perfectly folded napkin on the plate. 10 minutes in, I could feel my heart doing its rabbit thing. Not scary, not yet. Just that old whisper of disapproval. Cassie leaned in. Dad, she said softly, you look a touch pale. Here, this'll settle you. She held out a mug. The steam lifted into my face. Chamomile, with honey, and something else. I took a cautious sip and tasted a very faint bitterness under the floral. It wasn't familiar. I almost set it down. Then I thought about my grandson's hopeful posture and the effort this household always makes to pretend we are closer than we are. So I swallowed another sip and said, that's nice. We'll keep it low-key tonight, Mark said, too casually. No toasts. We know you've been, keeping an eye on your ticker. He tapped his chest twice with 2 fingers. A gesture I make. He had copied it. I nodded and cut my ham into slow, even squares. Beneath the bright talk, something was wrong with the air, like the house had taken a long, deep breath and was waiting to see if anyone noticed. Halfway through the carrots, the room tilted a fraction. I set the fork down. The fork seemed farther away than it should have been. My chest felt heavy with a soft weight, like wet cotton. I pressed my palm to the table and breathed in. The chamomile rose from my throat like a shadow. Dad? Mark said. His face was distorted, concern, calculation, a flicker of relief that he smothered so quickly I almost believed I imagined it. Dad, you're sweating. I'm fine. The voice that came out of me belonged to my father. Just need a minute. I tried to stand and the floor came up too quickly. The room turned into a corrugated tunnel of light and faces and Cassie's hands, all sugar, fussing with my collar. There was a taste in my mouth like coins. Emma's face swam close. She whispered something I couldn't catch. Then a siren that wasn't really a siren, it was the old house fan in my chest coming on all at once. The tunnel narrowed. The light went away in a neat, careful way, as if someone had folded it. I woke to beeping and the faint chalk smell of hospital linens. There is a particular way a hospital speaks to you in the middle of the night. The windows have the blue of aquarium glass. The lights hum even when they are off. A machine at your right hand knows your heart better than you do, and it doesn't love you. A nurse named Shireen came in with the soft tread of someone entering a sanctuary. She checked my wrist, the line in my hand, the wit's end of my blood pressure. You scared some folks tonight, Mr. Carver, she said gently. Paramedics brought you in around 8. Your EKGs, not my department to interpret, but the doc will be in when he's done with the delivery down the hall. You remember what happened? I remember, dinner, I said. My voice had left me somewhere. Tea. Chamomile. She smiled. My grandmother swears by it. We gave you some meds, ran labs. Your numbers dipped and then came back. Try to rest. You want to call somebody. I did not want to call my son. I wanted to call someone who knew me in the old way. The way a neighborhood knows you because you shovel its snow, because you are a particular silhouette crossing a particular street at a particular hour for 20 years. I reached for the phone with a hand that felt both strange and too familiar. The nurse helped me place the call. Ruth answered on the second ring. You're awake, she said. No hello. No surprise. Harold, I wasn't going to sleep till I knew. They hauled you out in an ambulance. I tried calling Mark, but that boy treats phone calls like bill collectors. Ruth, I said, and my voice broke into two pieces. What happened? From out here. She blew air through her teeth. All I know is I saw your lights turn on at 6, like usual, you with that neat crease of schedule, then off at 7. At 7:30, 2 cars stopped in front of your house. One was Mark's. One I don't know. A van. Cassie got out in a coat I wouldn't wear to a dogfight and went straight to your back door with that man. Your son fiddled with something at the front step like he was looking for a key under a rock that's never had a key under it. Then they all went in. Lights on. 20 minutes later, that same man comes out with a long cardboard box like a TV, maybe smaller. Cassie's carrying a laundry basket with cords sticking out. Mark is hauling a banker's box with a label on the side, looked like papers. They made 3 trips. Nobody looked my way. Nobody looked any way. Like they didn't want to see a world around them. The monitor registered my heart's opinion. Shireen glanced over, then away, letting me have the dignity of a spike. Ruth, I said, steadying, are you sure? Maybe they were, putting things away. Maybe, I stopped. Ruth says that maybe is the word we use when we are carrying a truth we are not ready to set down. I'm sure, she said. And I'm going to say something else, and you can choose to be angry with me tomorrow. Before the first car, at maybe 6:20, a boy on a bike left something between your screen door and the inner door. Box that looked like a pharmacy bag. Skinny. Cassie opened it when she went in. Took something out and shook it. I only saw the angle. She tossed the bag in your recycling bin and then took it back out like she remembered it had a name on it. The room grew narrower again. Shireen made a small warning noise and laid a cool palm against my forearm. I breathed slower until the line returned to its composure. Ruth, I said quietly. Stay in your house tonight. Lock your doors. Don't call them. Don't call anyone. Thank you. Harold, she said, and her voice became the voice you allow yourself only when no one can see your face. Honey. What do you need? I need night, I said. And after that I'll need my house. The doctor came in with soft footsteps and a calm made of long practice. He was younger than my son. He examined me with hands that were thorough without being brisk. He asked about my heart, my medications, any new supplements. I told the truth except where I didn't know it yet. Sometimes holidays are unkind to our bodies, he said. Stress, salt, sleep. Your labs show some perturbations, will keep you overnight, repeat in the morning. We gave you something to help your heart settle. Do you feel safe? I thought about the mug Cassie held and the cinnamon air and Gary's watch ticking across the table. I thought about Ruth's porch lights blooming defensively when her dog hears feet on her gravel. I thought about the word safe, which has always been a small room with a locked door and a chair where my wife sits reading a mystery until I come back with a cup of tea. I feel awake, I said. Sometimes that's the opposite of safe, he said almost kindly. Try to rest. He wrote notes. The pen made a soft sound like breathing. When he left, the nurse adjusted my bed and switched off the light by the door. The machine beside me kept its faithful, indifferent vigil. I looked at the ceiling tiles until they became the underside of a lake. I slept in the way frightened men sleep, in small, unconvincing pieces. At 2:30 I opened my eyes to the sound of someone wheeling a cart down the hall. At 3:10 I listened to the hospital breathe. At 3:42 I made a decision with the simple clarity that comes when you have no interior furniture left to move. I would not lie here while night did the work I needed to do. I unplugged what could be unplugged safely. I stood slowly. The world did not lurch. I dressed in the clothes folded on the chair. The canvas tote sat beneath them. Shireen must have tucked it there. I slid the strap over my shoulder. I wrote a short note and folded it so it would be found, went home to check on house. Back by dawn. H.C. There are doors in hospitals that will open for a man who walks like he belongs. The night nurse in the glass cube was reading. I nodded as if returning from a smoke break I don't take. The elevator sang its little sound. In the lobby, the security guard was talking to a woman with a newborn burritoed against her chest. The automatic doors breathed me into the sharp, honest air. Outside, the world was clean and tinny. The parking lot lights turned the snow into sugar. I called a car service and gave my address. The driver looked at me in the mirror once, twice, decided I was not his story for the night, and drove. When we turned onto my street, I saw Ruth's window glow like a coal. I texted back. Don't turn on any more lights. I'm okay. Her reply came instantly, I see you. I'm here. My house looked like itself. The sight of it hit me with the force of a memory. Evelyn stepping onto the porch in her slippers, clipper in hand, to fuss at the geraniums. I stood on the walk and listened. The snow made its small, padded noises. Nothing. And then, something else. That same held breath I had felt at dinner, now in my own siding, my own front step. The spare key lives in a place my father taught me to use and then taught me to change. It was not under a planter. It was not above a lintel. It was where your hand goes only when you're reaching for something else. I found it the way I always do, by remembering the way I was when I hit it. I let myself in. The first air of a house tells you the truth. Mine smelled faintly of ham and cinnamon and old paper. It also smelled, under that, of strangers. A sweetness I don't keep. The heat was set higher than my usual. A light had been left on in the den, the one by the shelf with the framed photo of Evelyn kneeling in the garden, her headband pushed back, laughing. I stood very still and let the rooms introduce themselves as if I were new. Then I moved. In the kitchen, a mug I don't own sat beside the sink with a tidy watercolor of chamomile petals around the rim. 2 tea bags lay spent on a paper towel. The trash smelled like oranges and the plastic tang of a new electronics wrapper. I opened the blue bin by the back door. On top was a narrow white box from a boutique pharmacy, the kind that sells complicated vitamins to rich people and tinctures with labels that look like invitations. Someone had ripped the label nearly off. I held the remaining triangle to the light. I could read the letters, It'll. Beneath, in tiny print, cardioactive, use only per license direction. I put the box into a zip bag from the drawer. I am a man who labels screws. I am a man who has been called overcautious when caution would have done. The den had been tidied in a way a stranger tidies, things squared that I leave slightly askew, the coaster not the one I use, the blanket folded with the right side out when I always fold it with the seam showing so the cat hair stays inside. On my desk, the printer sat with its tongue out, a single sheet caught on the feed. I turned the power on. The screen blinked to life and offered me resume. I pressed it. The printer gave a patient cough and delivered the sheet. It was a form with my name at the top. Durable power of attorney for healthcare and finances. Below that, my son's name as agent. The signature line held my name in a close enough imitation to fool a tired clerk. Not slanted like mine. A little too careful. A puddle of ink at the beginning of the H. On the floor beside the printer, a second page, another form, a quitclaim deed template with my address and a blank for consideration, and in the margin, in a hand I recognized from birthday cards, Cassie's note, can notarize Tuesday. Call Gary Ree, wires. My breath made that sound again, the old house fan in my chest. I sat in my chair and let the room return to its size. I looked at Evelyn's photo. She looked back at me with the maddening, lovely calm of the dead. Okay, I said aloud, because sometimes you have to make a word a plank and step onto it. Okay. In the hall closet a space gaped where the camera I used to photograph birds should have been. The cabinet where I keep the silver, it is not fancy, it is ours, had been disturbed and reclosed by hands that did not know how the latch likes to sit. The file drawer in the back room was locked the way I lock it, a key through a loop I made from an old coat hanger, hidden behind a paperback of Thoreau. The lock was intact. The top drawer, though, the one where I keep cheerful nonsense and household warranties, was lighter than it had been this morning. I opened it. The envelope with the original will lay in front like a decoy. The fat envelope with the paid-off notices, the title to Evelyn's car, the file folders with bank letters, gone. I sat on the rug. It is an ugly rug we bought because Evelyn liked the roses in it even though the red bled onto everything. That ugliness steadied me. I opened the original will and saw the ordinary, faithful signatures of two people who got old together and imagined the future as a thing you could set on a shelf and dust. I put it into the bag with the box from the bin and the printer pages. I went upstairs. Ben's old room, the one with the baseball border I never had the heart to remove when he decided he was a guitarist, not a shortstop, had a new square of emptiness where the TV had been. In my room, the top of the dresser was neat, too neat. Evelyn's hairbrush, yes, I kept it, had been moved a fraction to the left. People who plan forget the small gestures of a house. They forget that a hairbrush has a place like a sparrow's nest has a place, a degree of angle that says home. On my nightstand, the little ceramic dish where I keep my pills had one pill that did not belong. Rounder. Coated. I put it into the bag. I took a photograph of the dish on my phone with my wedding ring beside it for scale. In the living room, the couch had a compressed spot on the right cushion where a man heavier than me had sat very still for a long time. I knelt and looked beneath the couch. There were the usual pennies and a peppermint wrapper and a button. There was also a glove. Blue nitrile. And a pen with a law firm's name I didn't recognize. All of this took 30 minutes. The house stayed quiet. The snow did its small work. I walked to the back door and looked through the slats of the blind. Ruth's window light had gone out and then on again and then off. She was doing what we agreed, looking without appearing to look. I made tea in my own kettle with my own tea bag. The bitter taste from the dinner mug rose out of memory like a bruise under skin. I rinsed my mouth as if rinsing it would rinse the knowledge. When I turned, I saw the canvas tote sitting where I'd put it by the coat tree. Inside, my boring paper life, the accordion folder with the deed, the insurance, the old will's copy. I slid it out. For a half-second, I considered leaving, going back to the hospital, letting Day handle what Night had handed to me. Instead I sat at the kitchen table where Evelyn and I had balanced our checkbook with a pencil and a ruler, and I made 3 piles: evidence, original things, copies. Then I wrote. December 24th, I wrote in my clear, schoolteacher hand. After hospital admission from Christmas dinner at Mark and Cassie's, heart event, returned to house at 3:50 a.m. with spare key. Observations: kitchen teacup unknown, boutique pharmacy box, Ital, in blue bin, printer with DPOA and deed template, partial signature, missing electronics, TV from Ben's room, missing papers from top drawer, nitrile glove and pen beneath couch, pill and dish does not match my prescriptions. Called neighbor Ruth at 3:05 a.m. She observed Mark, Cassie, an unknown man removing boxes earlier this evening. Intend, call lawyer in morning. Get toxicology. Photograph everything now. Lock file drawer with original will. Go back to hospital before rounds. I started to sign my name and stopped. Then I printed it, block letters. There is a time for flourish and a time for bricks. In the morning, men in white coats like me best when I am compliant. I returned to the hospital before dawn carried Day on its back. I slipped into the room and lay down and discovered, with a strange gratitude, that I could still be the kind of person who appears to have never left. Shireen raised an eyebrow when she saw the note I had left, the one about going home, and then she raised the other when she saw me under it. You are either the most honest man I ever met or the most stubborn, she said softly. Everything okay at home? Everything is the way it is, I said. I would like to speak to the doctor. And I would like to speak, very soon, to a toxicologist. Big word, she said, not unkindly. I'll page your doc. Mark and Cassie came mid-morning with flowers and concern and the script they had prepared. Mark gripped my shoulder too hard, a brotherly squeeze a little off-key. Geez, Dad, he said. You scared us to death. You went to the house? I asked. My tone was flat and grandfatherly. If my father had used it on me, I would have sat up straighter to hide the thing in my pocket. What? Cassie blinked. No. Why would we, Harold, you know we'd never. What do you mean? We had the kids, presents. Ruth said, I said mildly, that you stopped by to fetch the fruitcake you left on my counter last week. Cassie's eyes did a quick calculation and then found the answer. Right, she said with a smile. Guilty. I forgot. I figured ants. Ants in December, I said. I smiled back. You always were an optimist. Gary texted me, because of course Cassie texted Gary, and Gary texted me because he is the kind of man who thinks names on phones make you belong to one another. Thinking of you. Docs we were going to review, no rush. Happy to swing by hospital later. I wrote back, not necessary. Thank you. The doctor came in at noon and spoke to me in a voice that had grown more careful. Your labs show something we'd like to explore, he said. You know your troponins. I know my heart, I said. I also know what digitalis is, but I don't know if I know it for the right reason. That made him look at my face as if it had a different name written on it. Why do you say that? Because I drank tea last night that tasted like a memory I don't have, I said. Because my neighbors saw a boutique pharmacy box go into my house when I wasn't home. Because my daughter-in-law, I stopped. I am not a man who makes declarations without evidence. Because my son has always believed that money is a language he will learn next year, and he is very tired of translation. He listened as a good doctor listens, not to the words, but to their arrangement. We can run specific essays, he said. I need to ask questions I wish I didn't. Could anyone you know have reason to? Yes, I said. And also no. Because while I can list reasons, I cannot list souls. He nodded. We'll draw blood now and again in 3 hours. Meanwhile, rest. When he left, I called my lawyer. Stephen is the kind of man who wears the same blue shirt because it lets him think about other things. He has been my lawyer for 27 years because when Evelyn and I sat in his office to draft the first will he said, my job is to protect your decisions not from strangers, but from the future versions of you that panic. Harold, he said. You sound like a man standing in a load-bearing doorway. I am, I said. Stephen, I need 3 things. First, I need you to accept an envelope I will bring to your office this afternoon, original will, photographs, evidence. Second, I need you to file a notice with the county clerk freezing any recorded real estate transactions with my name for 72 hours, if there is such a thing. Third, I need to know if we can call a notary to my house tomorrow and film a conversation legally. You can, he said. As for the second thing, we can record a memorandum of facts that would give any title company pause. It's not foolproof, but it makes a mess for anyone trying something fast. Harold, what happened? I'll tell you in person, I said. For now, assume the worst and help me walk toward it. When I hung up, I tasted chamomile and pennies again. Cassie's flowers sat on the windowsill, lilies that would make the room smell of funerals by morning. I turned them toward the glass the way you turn a picture of an untrustworthy man to face the wall. Evening came and with it the soft march of hospital routines. I signed a discharge against advice. I signed it calmly and said I would return first thing in the morning for more draws. Shireen looked at me with the expression of a woman who has watched many men choose their own door. You come back, she said. Whatever you think, whatever you plan, you come back here if that heart taps weird. I will, I said. I need to go home. The world outside seemed a little too crisp, the way it does when you have been inside long enough for your edges to soften. Ruth met me at my gate with a thermos and a look that was both fierce and maternal. You don't go in there alone, she said, then realized she had already arrived at the conclusion. I'm coming. You're not, I said gently. I love you too much. Then I'm watching, she said. And if the porch light blinks 3 times, the police will have old lady footprints in their pretty snow. I went in. The house recognized me. I could feel it settle. I turned on the kitchen light and the den lamp and left the rest dark. It is important to decide which rooms will tell the truth tonight. I set the envelope for Stephen on the table. I took photographs of everything again, because the small god of courts demands offerings of proof. I wrote notes. I put dates. I did what I have always done to make emergencies less powerful, I alphabetized fear. At 9:15, the text came I had been waiting for without admitting it, from Mark. Dad, if you're up to it, can we swing by? Just 5 minutes. Want to hug you. Kids won't sleep until they see your face. There is a kind of love that makes you a fool and a kind that turns you into a detective. I chose the latter and wrote, yes. I'm home. Door is open. They came with the air of people stepping into a lobby where a concierge should be. Mark's face was a careful map. Cassie's smile had been ironed. The children stood back, like mannequins in travel clothes. Gary wasn't with them, I noted, and then I reminded myself to be grateful for every absence. Dad, Mark said, stepping into a hug that was more choreography than embrace. His coat smelled faintly of someone else's cologne. You look good. I feel the way I feel, I said. Sit. Cassie perched. Mark stood. Emma slid against the door frame where she could see both the front yard and my face. Ben's hands had that anxious rhythm of boys who don't know where to put them. I wanted to walk him out to the garage and hand him a wrench and stand in companionable silence while we found a bolt that needed tightening. Later, I told myself. Get to later. I wanted to say, Mark began, and then in the space between wanted and to say I saw it, the turn. The small pivot from concern to business, as easy as moving a coin from one pocket to another. We were thinking, given last night was scary, maybe it's time we make some decisions. We want to take pressure off you. We talked to Gary and he said it's straightforward, durable power of attorney, little changes. We can get a notary to swing by tomorrow. I put together a list of the things we can consolidate. You know, the TV, the camera stuff that can be sold for cash so you're not sitting on, like, clutter. He said clutter like a doctor says malignancy. Cassie leaned forward as if I were at a distance none of us had chosen. We just want to help, Dad. I nodded, the way a man nods when he is watching his house burn and cataloging what is inside it. Gary, I said. What an interesting friend. He's family, Cassie said. No, I said gently. He isn't. Emma made a small sound, the kind you make when you almost drop a glass and then catch it. What's this? Mark said, a touch of irritation escaping its pen. Dad, we're trying to do the responsible thing. You scared the kids. Did I said, and I looked at Emma. She held my eyes and did not look away. Her hand lifted a fraction, palm up, one of those old childhood signs that can mean anything from I'm sorry for the dog to I saw Mom crying to don't say the thing that breaks everything. It also means help. Let's do our own responsible thing, I said. I placed the zip bag on the table. I set the printer pages on top of it. I was very calm. I made tea last night, I said, in my own house, with my own kettle. Tonight I would prefer questions to tea. What is this, Dad? Cassie reached for the bag and then pulled her hand back as if I had placed a snake on the table. What are you accusing us of? Nothing, I said. I am letting objects tell a story. This is a box from a boutique pharmacy Ruth saw go into my house. It contains something that a doctor would recognize faster than a son. This is a page from my printer with my name written on it by someone who thinks I'd up my I with more commitment than I do. This is a deed template. This is a glove. This is a pill that does not belong with the others in my dish. This is the smell of cinnamon on a night that contained fear. Mark laughed in the brittle way men laugh when they deny the rope around their ankle is a rope. Dad, for God's sake. You think we'd, why would we, what do you think, that we tried to, what? Poison you? Steal your? I think, I said quietly, that fear is an animal that makes a home in good houses on good streets. I think you love money the way some men love boats. I think your wife had a plan that involved paperwork. I think you wanted to be better than that and forgot the way out when the path narrowed. I think you believe it's not stealing if you can convince yourself it's for the greater good, yours, the kids, the neatness of the future. I think you had a glass mug in your kitchen that isn't in mine. I think you stood over me last night while I was asleep in your guest room, and I think you were relieved to hear me breathing. No one spoke. Outside, the snow fell in the slow, useless way of arguments. Ben made a small squeak and looked horrified at himself for having made it. I let silence stretch until it formed its own shape. Then I said, "Tomorrow at 9, Stephen will meet us here with a notary, and the police will be informed. We will have a conversation, not an arrest. That is my gift. You will bring back the papers you removed from my home. You will bring the electronics. You will bring the box from the bin that Cassie took out and then put back. You will bring the man's name who carried out the TV. And you will tell me whether I need to protect my grandchildren from you, not just financially but factually." Cassie stood as if struck by a current. "We are not criminals," she said with a shock of pride. "We are family." "Both things can be true," I said. Mark's eyes had gone dark in the way my father's eyes went dark the day I told him I wanted to be a teacher instead of taking over his hardware store. He looked at me as if I had stolen something that belonged to him, the version of me that believes him first. Then his shoulders sagged. A sound came out of him that made me want to reach for his hand and also for a fire extinguisher. "I lost my job," he said. He didn't look at Cassie. "Not the promotion. That was I lost it in October." "We've been," Gary said. He said there were ways to. "Dad, we were scared." "Scared is a tunnel," I said. "You don't dig downward to get out." He nodded as if something had finally translated. Cassie's face had hardened with the determination of a person who believes she is the only adult in a room of children. "We'll talk to the lawyer," she said. "We'll bring the things." "Enough drama." "Not drama," I said. "Names." They left with the stiffness of people walking on wet ice. Emma hung back. She stood close enough that I could smell her shampoo, the one with grapefruit. "Grandpa," she whispered, "I didn't drink the tea. I made it. She stirred it and told me to carry it carefully because your hands shake." I closed my eyes and opened them and made my face into a place she could set something down without breaking it. "I know," I said. "You did what you do, you carried what someone handed you. Go home. Sleep with your door locked. If anyone tells you you can't come tomorrow, text me a yes if you can and a no if you can't." She nodded. Her eyes were her father's eyes at 9 years old, when he had cried because he had broken a jar of nails in the garage and thought I would love him less for making a mess. Morning wore its work clothes. Stephen arrived with his blue shirt and his quiet. The notary, a woman with competent hands, set up her little stamp like a priest laying out sacraments. I had already met the dawn at the hospital to let them take more blood. I had sat on the edge of the bed while Shireen coiled the tube and told me that sometimes hearts send up flares that look like enemy fire when it's just weather. Mark and Cassie came 20 minutes late. Gary did not come, but a man with a tool belt did, and when he crossed my threshold I saw in his eyes the small apology of a contractor asked to carry out tasks beyond screws. He set the TV in the living room and stepped back outside as if distance were absolution. Cassie put a stack of folders on the table. She placed the boutique pharmacy bag on top, now with the name facing up, beautiful serif font, expensive paper. "I googled it," she said quickly. "It's for atrial fibrillation. It's also a plant that can stop a heart that wants to keep beating," I said. "My doctor will tell me which it did last night." Mark looked like a boy in a sweater he had outgrown but was still wearing for the sake of the school photo. "Dad," he said, and stopped. Stephen cleared his throat in his professional way. "I am here," he said, "as Harold's counsel and as a neighbor who has watched his tomatoes from over the fence for 20 years. Phones will be placed on the buffet and remain there. We will speak one at a time. We will not lie." He paused. "This conversation is being recorded. The notary will witness any statements offered as affidavits." Cassie laughed a laugh that wanted to be a bark. "Come on." "No," Stephen said without moving. "Come in." It took 90 minutes to put the words in a row. Cassie cried and then became flint. Mark apologized and then began to explain. Stephen kept time with his pen. The notary stamped anything that needed stamping, and at one point she looked at me as if to ask permission to be human. I nodded and she swallowed hard and continued to be a notary. The story was the story stories are, debts and an idea of fairness that leans toward the person telling it. "We didn't want to hurt you," Cassie said twice, and both times I nearly told her to choose something else to say because it is a sentence you use to keep yourself company, not to offer to others. When it was over, Stephen laid out steps. Emergency protective order against any transactions in my name. A formal notice to banks. A letter to the boutique pharmacy requesting the prescribing physician's information under suspicion of misuse. A statement from Ruth. A preemptive conversation with the police department's white-collar division to create a record without slapping handcuffs on Christmas morning. "You will move out of any plan that involves my house," I said to Cassie, as if your shoes were on fire. To Mark, I said quietly, "I will not be your bank. I will be your father, if you can remember how to have one." He nodded with a gratefulness that made him look, for a second, like the boy who had fallen off his bike at 8 and sobbed until I showed him how to turn the scraped knee into a story. "I will make it right," he said, which is another confetti phrase, but this time it had a weight tied to it, a small stone. When they were gone, Stephen held the bag with the box from the bin as if it contained a small, sleeping snake. "We'll turn this over now," he said. "Harold." He stopped, and lawyers do not like to stop because stopping is not billable. "I am sorry. Not in my professional capacity. In the capacity that recognizes the shape of a man." I nodded. "It happens to men who put their good dishes out," I said. "My fault was believing that people who know how we stack them won't drop them." He was quiet for a long moment. "Your fault," he said, "was loving people beyond the safety you built. I will not suggest you stop." Afternoon light laid its thin coin on the table. The house breathed the way houses breathe when they have witnessed something and are deciding whether to keep or release it. Ruth knocked and then let herself in because she is the kind of person who respects doors but not formality. She set a casserole on the counter, macaroni and cheese because the world keeps offering the body its simplest comfort when the mind is working with broken glass. "You look like you swam a lake," she said. "How's the ticker?" "Beating," I said. Honest, if resentful. She poured coffee and then put her hand over mine the way old friends do when they would like to hold you and accomplish something practical at the same time. "I watched them load a television out of your car and I didn't scream," she said. "I will go scream in the backyard later." "You will not," I said. "You will teach me how to live in my house again without flinching each time the furnace knocks." "Fair," she said. "You want me to stay?" "For an hour," I said. "Until the light changes. Then I want to sit here the way I used to sit with Ev and listen to the news too loudly and fold napkins wrong." We did that. We sat like people in a painting. The news told us about other people's disasters so that ours might feel both less and more. Outside, the children down the street shrieked at the first snowball that actually held together. Ruth left at dusk with a wave that said both "I will be back" and "you are still here." I walked through the house with the deliberate steps of a man who has met his rooms all over again. The den. The kitchen. The back room with its stupid file drawer and its coat hanger lock. I placed the original will in a safe deposit box of the mind, a list I gave Stephen and a separate list I left with Ruth. I opened the nightstand dish and tipped the odd pill into a second bag marked "Do not eat," even though that was not necessary for me, only necessary for the part of my heart that thought, protect others. When the phone rang, I knew it would be Emma. "Grandpa," she said in a rush. I told Mom I forgot my scarf and she said fine, and then I went out and walked to the end of the street and kept going, and I don't want to go back right away. Can I come sit at your table? I promise I'll just do homework." "Of course," I said. "Bring your homework. Bring your scarf. Bring the piece of your heart that is heavy and set it on the table and we will look at it like a science project." She came with cheeks like apples and a backpack full of the particular weight of a teenager's life. She sat and opened a textbook and did not read a single line for 30 minutes. Then she said, so quietly that the word almost missed its own mouth, "I knew." "Of course you did," I said. "You live in your house." "I poured it," she whispered. "I made the tea. I didn't put anything. Mom did that part. But the mug was in my hand." "You carried a mug," I said. "You did not brew an intention." We were quiet. Outside, the streetlight came on the way they do the week after solstice, reluctantly. "Grandpa," she said finally, "is this the part where families break?" "This is the part where families tell the truth," I said. "Sometimes those parts look the same until later." She nodded and then did her homework for real, pencil moving in small, ordinary acts of faith. I made us toast. We ate it with butter and salt the way Evelyn had liked when we were young and debt tasted like pennies. When I drove her home, Mark met us on the porch. He looked as if he had aged 10 honest years in one dishonest night. He put his hand on Emma's head and then took it away as if touching a miracle burns. "Thanks, Dad," he said. For the way you did this." "I didn't do anything yet," I said. "That comes tomorrow and the day after. What I did was plug a hole in a boat." He nodded. He kept his hand at his side, not reaching for mine because he is wise enough to know that a hand belongs to the person who offers it. "Merry Christmas," he said, and he meant it the way a person in a storm says, "I think I see the shore." "Merry Christmas," I said back, and I meant it the way a man at a kitchen table means it, with a plate of toast crumbs in front of him and a heart that has decided to be stubborn about all the right things. The tests came back the next day like letters. The doctor spoke with the compassion of a man who has learned that bad news and good news sometimes travel in the same envelope. "You had exposure to a cardiac glycoside," he said, careful to be accurate without turning a hospital room into a lecture hall. "Enough to make your heart misbehave. Not enough to, you're lucky. We'll monitor. Hydrate. No new meds without talking to us." I thanked him for the truth and for the way he did not look away while saying it. He asked if I felt safe again. I said I felt better, which is sometimes all we get. Stephen moved quickly, which is what money buys when you use it for defense instead of display. Banks flagged. County clerk recorded our messy, necessary memo. The police took statements as if picking up small birds. There were no arrests. There was a file. I changed the locks, not because a lock keeps out love gone wrong, but because ritual matters. I put the nitrile glove, the odd pill, the box, the printer pages all into a climate-controlled, labeled world where facts live until they are called to a courtroom or a conscience. Cassie sent me 3 long texts that all said the same thing: we didn't mean to, we were scared, you know we love you. I did not respond. Because love without repair is just an adjective. In the space that followed, the house and I learned each other again. I slept in small pieces and then longer ones. I cooked for 2 and then ate for 1. I took my walks. I salted the steps. One afternoon in January, snow still burnishing the curb, I saw Mark on my stoop. He wore humility like a loner jacket over his own. He held a paper bag with apples in it because he remembered that's what Evelyn once told him to bring when you're apologizing and not trying to curry favor. He stood without knocking until I opened the door. "Can we?" he said, and then stopped, and then began again with the you I had not heard from him since he was 11. "Can you teach me about the file drawer? About the bills? About the way you know which contractor is a liar by the way he walks across your grass? About how to be the man you thought you were protecting me from having to be?" I led him into the kitchen because the kitchen is where you begin when you are relearning what a family is. I took out the accordion folder and the 2 good mugs. I told him what Evelyn used to tell me when I wanted to fix the future with an afternoon: slow is not a cousin to never. Slow is a kind of promise. We sat. We began. Secrets leave stains. You learn to live around them, then, if you are lucky, you clean them with patience and the right brush. Spring came the way it always does in our town, in jumps and backward steps, in daffodils breathing all at once beside a trash can, and in the particular joy of packed winter coats collapsing on the top shelf. The heart does what the heart does: complains, forgives. On a Wednesday that tasted like rain, I was in the garage sorting screws, the act that passes for prayer in my life, when Emma came by on her bike. She skidded lightly on the gravel and hopped off, the seat still too low because she refuses to admit she has grown. "Finals," she said, which is a word that makes kings into mice. Mom's in a mood. Dad's quiet. Ben is making a drum set out of pots. "Can I study here?" "Study in the kitchen," I said. "I'll make you eggs." She grinned and ran a hand along the workbench the way other girls might run a hand along a dress. "Grandpa?" "Yes." "When I have a house, can you teach me where the key goes?" "Yes," I said, and I thought, there are some safes you open by telling the next person you trust where to look. That night, before bed, I stood at the back door and looked out at the small, square lawn where Evelyn used to command tomato cages and I used to pretend to be bad at tying knots so she could put her hands over mine. The house was quiet in its trustworthy way. The new locks shone dully. The file drawer sat without drama in the back room, a dog that bites only the person who tells it to. It is tempting to craft an ending that is all clean lines, arrests, confessions, forgiveness that behaves. The truth is that most justice is infrastructural. You build it, brick, plank, memorandum, so that harm has to strain to climb. You staple it to your decisions. You teach a grandson how to coil an extension cord, and in that coil is the lesson that things last when you respect how they were made. On the next Christmas, I said yes to dinner only after I invited everyone to my house. I set the table with the good plates and the ugly rug under us like a joke no one can take away. Cassie brought a salad she overdressed. Mark brought humility shaped like help. Gary sent a card. Ruth came early to supervise the ham and to kiss the house walls in her superstitious way. Before we ate, Emma poured tea into my mug. She lifted it and paused. I smiled at her and she smiled back and set the mug in front of me, the steam honest and simple. "Wait," Ben said, in the sudden seriousness of 9-year-old boys. We should do a toast. I saw this in a movie. You hold up the cup and say something real. We held up our cups. Snow moved outside with the hush of the old house fan. My heart went tap-tap and not in the wrong way. To houses, I said, and to the people who learn how to live in them with each other. To locks that keep the right things in. To honesty that is not polite. Emma added softly, and to slow. And to slow, I agreed. We drank. The cinnamon was only cinnamon. The lights were not a stage. The animal of fear had moved on. It was still winter, but the smallest green tips had begun in the flower bed Evelyn had loved and I had tended, even after, because that is what you do with a legacy that is not money, you keep planting it, and you guard it with whatever you have, which is sometimes a file drawer and sometimes a list of names and sometimes only your steady, unperformative love. That night, when I locked the door, I did it twice out of habit and once out of gratitude. I set the key in its place that is not obvious and is not secret either, just ours. I turned off the lights and the house sighed the way a body sighs after pain, and the word that stood beside me in the quiet was not safety, not exactly. It was something I liked better, belonging.
Hello everyone, and thank you for watching. I truly hope you enjoyed listening to the story as much as I enjoyed creating it. If you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel to help support the creation of more stories like this. Have a great day or evening.